Good evening or good afternoon, anybody that may be in stream. Welcome. Just going to try something different for this somewhat random stream. I'm going to try a different craft just for this particular session. This particular craft that I'm doing here is called Punchcraft, with tools made by a company in the UK called Webster's. Something I've done for quite some time. I'm just going to try something completely out of the blue. Never tried this particular thing before, so I'm going to try a locomotive, which is the reference picture that you can see, and also the image that you can probably see in the hoop in front of me. So I've now just got to decide what colour to start with. So we've got two levels of red, so we've got a lighter red there, we've got let's go with something that probably looks a little bit odd. I wonder if that will look okay. For the roof section, then a bright red for the next level, and then a standard red for the third level of the and most of the loco itself. That doesn't look too bad, I don't think. We have an area of darker red, which I've got some darker red here as well, just for the front of the loco. Okay, yeah, we'll do that. So I'm going to start with the roof. So this is done using a relatively unique tool, and what I need to do is thread this through the length of the tool, which would be challenging without the particular threader that's available. And just cut off the end of the thread, makes it easier to go into the threader, and then I just pull it all the way through the needle. We'll get it out at this end. Sometimes can be a bit fiddly. It's even more fiddly when you've got an artist's model laid on your knee. And then it has to go through a tiny hole at the end of the needle. So again, just thread the threader through, and the wool then has to go through the threader. Since the hole is bigger, it's easier than it would be trying to thread it through the hole of the needle, and there we go. Right, now put that threader somewhere safe because I don't want to lose it. Okay, that's the first position. I think we will do this on position 2. We'll start with that. So now, here we go. We'll go and see how well this gets on. I'm not sure how well this is going to work, especially with a pussycat on my knee. It's going to start from about there. All I'm doing literally now is just pushing this needle through the material. The material, well, as I push it through, nothing's happening. Okay, so we'll start that again. That's not necessarily unusual to start with. It's annoying, but not necessarily unusual. So I'm just concentrating to try and make sure that this, once it starts, it's usually okay. But what you're getting with this is, if the cotton doesn't unroll properly, which is what something's happening now, it's not pulling through properly. Okay, Let me try. Just one of these odd things about this particular craft, which can be a little bit irritating at times. What I'm going to do is try running the needle backwards, so to speak, or in a different direction. Once it's going, it's usually okay, but I do often find it quite irritating to get going. Okay, no, it's not. It's still not doing it. Something is odd. What's going on with this? Let me try from a different starting position. This can be really irritating when this sort of thing happens. Okay, I'm trying to also work here with a pussycat laid on my knee, which isn't the easiest of things to do. And that obviously is restricting my movement a little bit. Now then, is that working or is that pulling out? Yeah, it's pulling out again. I'm going to try rethreading this thing altogether. In actual fact, I may even switch tools. I've got two of these, and one of them I can't remember now, it's a while since I've done this, but one of them, I've got a feeling that one of the tools always caused me a problem. And that may be what's going on here. So I think what I'm going to do is try changing tools. So we'll just persuade this pussycat to go visit somewhere else, which is just done, and then I shall get my other spare tool out, and we shall try the spare one. Okay, put the needle away safe so that I don't jab myself on it, because the needle is relatively sharp. Okay, so we'll try threading this needle and we'll see if it makes a difference. If I do it try too many times, then one of the problems I will come across will be that I damage the fabric too much to continue, and so I then have to throw it away and start again, but hopefully we won't get to that level. Okay, so threading's a bit fiddly, as it almost is with any kind of needle. So we're to thread it down the length of the tool, and then we thread it through the very tip of the needle. Okay, so we'll have another go at doing this. Tell you what might actually help as well. Let's just make sure that there is a surplus of material loose at the top here to give it the best chance of pulling through the needle. That appears to be helping. So what you're looking at is an art form or a craft which is described as Punchcraft, because we're punching wool through this material. It's effectively like a miniature rug. Rug making can often be done in this way as well. So hence the term pushcraft, crafting by punching, I guess, is how it might be described. This is the material on the tool is effectively just a cotton type material. It's a little bit fluffy, unlike cotton, which is probably more There we go. Yeah, we're getting marks on the other side now. This is a form which you work from the back rather than from the front. What I'm doing is creating loops of thread on the other side, and it's those loops on the other side that will form the completed picture when I'm done. The material I'm punching through is something called a twill. Don't know what that means, but I do know it's a fairly specialist fabric. I have tried this on other fabrics in the past, and what happens with other fabrics is you end up creating lots and lots of holes and it doesn't work. So there's something particular about this fabric which I guess the needle pushes its way through, whereas on others it seems to cut. Now I know this particular way of working is very sensitive to the tension on the thread, so what I am just going to do is make sure that it stays fairly loose, at least to start with. I know once we get more than a few layers in, it will actually be less sensitive to that. The material that's around so the rows already completed around it tend to hold the new ones in place. So once you're going, it's a lot easier. And so all we do is we keep going backwards and forwards through the area. We're effectively just sort of colouring it in, really. But it's quite a satisfying thing to do. There's something about you possibly can hear the crunch as the needle goes through the fabric, and there's something kind of satisfying about that. And it's a fairly quick art form as well, as you'll sort of see. We'll rapidly build up colour here. We're already going down the second row. You can do this in any sort of order you like. I'm going down in rows just because that's easier for me to do. You develop your own techniques of doing this. You can go around in circles, do little blocks, doesn't really make any difference at all. Whilst it can look untidy on the back, it's the front that matters, and it doesn't show up at all in any shape or form, the order or the direction in which you did it. Once we get sufficient, or I finish this colour off, I'll turn it over and show you. Pink 355, good afternoon, welcome to the stream. It's called a punch tool. Or a needle sometimes. It's not, I don't think it has any particular technical name. It's just the manufacturer calls it a punch tool. You're punching the thread through the fabric. So it's really just kind of a needle that sorry, I'm just judging how much I have to do. It's really just a needle that drags the thread through the material to the other side. Now this one has a variable depth to it. It's got like I can extend the needle, which means that I get more thread on the other side, which gives me a larger loop on the other side, so I can actually add some dimensionality to it. But other than that, I don't particularly think there's anything particularly spectacularly special about the tool itself. So good afternoon to anybody that's joining the stream. Just for this afternoon, I just thought I'd just try something different. I normally do wood carving or pyrography or scraper board on stream, but I just felt like doing something different this afternoon. So this particular art form is one I haven't done for a little while, so I felt like doing something different, and I happen to like the picture of this locomotive that I'm doing, so I just thought I'd try the two and see how it came out. So, and just for what is a rainy Sunday afternoon here in the UK where I am, it felt like I can do this fairly quickly. As you can see, the colour builds up in a reasonably fast manner. So, as I was going to do it anyway for myself, I thought I'd show you guys. I have no idea how this is going to turn out, but we shall see together perhaps. The thread I'm using is a fairly, well, it's nothing particularly special. Again, these do come from the manufacturer just because that's how I bought them originally. They're a fairly woolly thread as opposed to more like cotton, which suits this work a little bit more than cotton would do. Can use cotton, I can also use embroidery thread, but generally for cotton I would probably use a slightly different tool. Same sort of thing, but it's the needle is designed slightly differently for use with the smoother cotton. It's a thinner needle because cotton is thinner than this is, and then you can use any cotton going. The material though that I'm punching through does seem to be a special material. I have tried other materials. This again is available from the manufacturer, but I have tried other materials, but one of the things I have found with other materials is that it just ends up making big holes and not actually doing what I'm doing here, which is punching the thread through. So something special about this particular material, which enables it to hold together even though I'm driving a very sharp needle through it. And yes, I have pricked myself with this needle more than once. And although I didn't exactly drive it into my finger, it is sharp and it does hurt. The thread is actually goes down the centre of it and then is pushed out through a little tiny hole in the side. Okay, so right, I'm almost completed this particular panel of colour. So once I do, I'll turn it over and show you just what it looks like at this stage. Yeah, that'll do. So what I'm just going to do is very carefully, well, relatively carefully at this point, just drag the needle out and hold the thread in place, because I want to pull an amount through, and if I just drag it, what I'll actually do is pull all those loops out, and I don't want to do that because that's just what I've just spent 10 minutes putting in. But they're not particularly fragile, but they will pull out if you get hold of them. So when I turn it over, that's kind of what it looks like. Now the picture will build up as I add more to it, and it will then start to look more three-dimensional as well. No, the machine's fine. I defy you to try. Well, you could do this by hand. You could push a needle backwards and forwards through it in a sewing motion, but if you tried to do that, it would be really hard work and take a heck of a lot longer than this. This is actually a variation on the way in which carpets are made. they're done. Actually, I might make this a bit deeper. Which colour am I using next? That one. Carpets are made in very much the same way as the thread of the carpet is pushed, if provided they're not woven carpets, that is, but as the threads are pushed through the base weave of the carpet. It's done in the same sort of way. But no, not cheating. But there again, I suppose even if it was cheating, I wouldn't like to do this any other way. It certainly wouldn't be fun. Might be work, but it wouldn't be fun. Okay, so great big long threaders to do this. It would be almost impossible to try and push this down the needle otherwise. Actually, I'm doing that, and the reason I wanted to change colour was to actually put the darker red in for a very small amount of. I shall just switch to the dark red. There's a very small amount I want to just do in one particular place before I continue. There's like a rain channel over the top of a door here, and I'd like to put that little detail in, so I'm going to do it now while I can still see where to do it. I can do it at any time, I can do it afterwards. It's not critical as to the time, but just while I can see from the transfer where I want it to go. Okay, so double threading, pulled it down through the length of the needle. Now it's got to go through a little tiny hole. It is important that the thread comes out the side of the needle, because it's the friction once it goes through the material which holds the thread in place and stops it pulling back out. So if you didn't put it through the side of the needle, you'd just literally pull the thread back out through the hole you've just created. Okay, this can also be done with some level of dimensionality. So I am actually going to create slightly larger loops just around here to do this. And I've done that by making the needle slightly longer. Now this may or may not show up once we get through, but the colour should, so. Just one line of thread basically. Can go over what I've already done. That's not a problem. It doesn't have to be in fresh areas of the fabric. So this lets you sort of insert, like I'm doing here, insert this sort of shape after the fact. Because it's going over a little bit of this lighter red that I've already done. Again, being very careful to just make sure I hold the thread in place while I pull it out of the needle. Otherwise I'll pull out the loops and then cut them off so that I don't catch the end of the thread. Now what I've just done there is just create a loop. It'll look untidy at the moment. It'll look a bit tidier once some more of the material's in. It always does look a bit rough to start with because the loops as you create the picture support each other and keep the blocks of colour fairly tight. So that'll look a bit better afterwards. Now then, whilst I've got this red in, I want it to do this front area here in this darker red, so I might as well keep it in, but I'm doing it on position 2 of the needle, not position 3. So now then, where does that start? All the way down there. Okay. no particular order to do this in, just wherever you happen to feel like it. And you can span small gaps as well, as I'm going to do here. There is a small gap that I just want to span. So it's just a case of holding the thread while you move it across the gap. Now I've got a limited supply of colours, so the reference picture that you see on the bottom left there has got quite a lot of subtlety of colours. There's an area around here where the horn is on this particular locomotive. If you look really carefully you can see it behind the grille. I'm just going to probably just do that black, or I may do red and black interspersed to see if I can make it look a bit darker, but really, you know, I don't have that particular colour available to me in the colour palette that I've got, so what I'll do is just use something, I say, like black. Okay, that's one row. Now start coming back. I prefer to do this in rows or sometimes circles, doesn't really matter. Do it in any order that you like. You can fill in little squares or however you choose. Do need to do the loops fairly close to one another, otherwise it does look really ragged once you turn it over, but there's no particular, you don't have to be very precise about it. And if you haven't done enough in any particular area, you can always go back afterwards and put some more in. And if you've made a mistake and put some where you don't want them to be, it's just a simple matter of pulling them out. You can keep going over the same piece of material a few times. You can't do it ad infinitum. Eventually you will destroy the material, but to start, if you've just made one row that's in the wrong place or something like that, you can just pull it out and start again without any particular problem. Sometimes the needle just won't go through. There we go. So you just have to move it slightly and try again. One of the reasons why I enjoy doing this particular type of art is it progresses really fast. I can complete a picture like this in about a few hours, depending just on how many colour changes there are and how big the areas are. This is a relatively large area I'm doing, especially as I want to do all of the background as well. I'm not going to be particularly detailed about the background, it's just probably going to be a single solid colour, but I do want to fill it in. Now I can't really see where, from the drawing I've got on the back here, I can't quite see where I wanted that dark grill to be, so I'm guessing. Yeah, I think it's about go down about there, so. Just like when you're doing painting by numbers or anything like that, you don't have to follow any particular pattern. I'm looking at this and going, you know what, I think that's about right. The manufacturer of these tools and the material do provide kits, and they also give you, well, you can buy patterns as well, ready printed patterns that you can then transfer to material, or they will even in the kits they give you everything you need, and they'll give you the patterns already printed onto the material, which is quite nice if you like completing kits. I don't mind doing them, but I do prefer to do my own images. I just find that more fun. I'm just punching a few extra loops through here just to make it a bit tighter. On the other side, make sure I've got a nice defined edge. And then I think that will be sufficient for the moment, so I'll pull this one through, cut off the thread holding it in place. We'll turn it over and have a look. 80 Fall Guy. They are a few years old, I must admit. I can't actually remember when I got that, but it is a long time ago. Punchcraft, Webster's Punchcraft. But I really enjoy doing it. Maybe, there we go. Maybe I'll inspire you to dig it out and try some more. Okay, so 2 colours, more to go. But as you can see, that's I've been broadcasting what now? Only about half an hour or so. 34 minutes. So it does progress fairly quickly, and the first sort of 5-10 minutes of this stream was it didn't like my other tool. I've got two of these, and the other tool for some reason wasn't working too well. I kept pulling the threads out, which is not ideal because you want them to stay where they are. Right, so I shall now do another. I've got a different colour of red to just come down here. Just doing a short block here. Actually, I've got the whole roof to do, but just doing a bit to start, see how it goes. Oh, that eagle looks quite nice, doesn't it? They do all sorts of things there. I've got what have I got? There's a Labrador puppy which I've done for my wife because she loves she loves any puppy, young animals, puppies and kittens. And there's the big cat, which you may remember seeing. The cat and the eagles are nice. I'm saying eagle. I'm fairly sure they do an eagle. It might not be what you have. You may have one that you created for yourself there. So please excuse me if you did. I'm not putting aspersions on you for completing a kit. It's nothing wrong with that at all. And of course, for anybody watching, they can be any size. They I haven't got that through the threader. The cotton based, there's a different coloured tool which is green, I think, which is mainly things like the size of the needle and stuff like that, which gets used for cotton, and that works a lot better because the thread is a lot thinner. That works better for doing little tiny pieces, so you can do the things, the same size as I'll say a button, but you know what I mean, the badges, inch across, something like that, Christmas decorations, because what you can do with this, once it's if you've done this, you can use fabric glue on the back, which then locks everything into place. Generally don't need to do it if it's a framed picture like this, but if you're going to turn it into something like a Christmas decoration, if you did some of the smaller ones, or things smaller, then if you put fabric glue on the back, you can, once it's dried, you can then cut around the outside, and you're left with what is effectively like a sew-on patch. So that can then either be just hung up by itself on like a Christmas tree, or you can sew it to clothing or stuff like that. Yeah, by all means. I think it's something like actually I'm quite happy to find it's Webster's Punchcraft is the manufacturer. Anyway, webstercraft.co.uk, I believe, off the top of my head. Yeah, that's the one. I'll drop that into for anybody who's interested in taking a look. Paste. So that's the manufacturer of the tool and the kits that Edifol guy there was referring to. There's quite a lot available. I prefer working away from myself, so I'm just going to turn this around and do it from this side. Doesn't actually matter, it's just I prefer working with, moving towards the open area of the piece. So everybody develops their own technique as to what they prefer to do. How long did it take you to do then, Edifol guy? And did you like doing it? I guess is the other question. It can be a bit fiddly until you get the technique, and then once you get the technique, it's quite an easy craft to do, and a great one for as long as you've got the patience to start and just develop the technique a little bit, because it can be a little fiddly to start. But once you have developed that technique, it can be a great art form for people who are new to it, because you develop the picture really fast. Which for beginners to any particular craft helps enormously, because that's one of the most demoralizing parts of any craft, is when you can spend several hours on it and all you've got to show for it is a little I don't know, a little corner, or a slightly different shaped piece of wood or something like that. Okay. Oh, and then you've got the eagle one there, yeah. No, that's alright. I just, Edifol guy, I was just wondering, whether, how long it took you to do the eagle, and did you enjoy doing it? That was all. This is the first time I've tried what might be described as a real-world image. I've done quite a few cartoon-like pieces. So, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I suppose cartoon-like pieces is the easiest description. So black outline, coloured interiors, or I've done kits for this. I am interested to see how this turns out. Actually, having said which, it's not the first. I've done this as an art form for it must be probably at least 10 years, but not done a great deal of it, and I've literally forgotten that I've got three Pussycat renditions done using this as an art form. One of the nice things with this particular tool is you can create dimensionality by lengthening or shortening the needle. The loop that's on the other side becomes either longer or shorter, and so you can actually create hills and valleys basically on the other side. And in doing so, things like animals, you can add a level of three-dimensionality to it, which makes them even more pleasing to look at. Oh, you make chainmail, do you? Oh dear. I'm guessing you're one of the guys I've seen streaming it then, Eddie Fall Guy, the chainmail stuff. I've seen a few people making the chains, and a couple of people making maybe the same people making panels out of the chainmail. I've not actually seen any jewellery as such yet, but I actually find there's so much going on in creative these days, and I do look out for people like you doing, if you're doing chainmail, because I love the physical crafts and arts more than I enjoy watching the electronic drawing, and so I do tend to look out. But unfortunately, despite the fact I've got a lot of bandwidth here and I've got 3 monitors, you can only watch so many streams at the same time. And there's just so many going on when I've got the free time to do it, and now that I've started streaming myself, I've got even less time available to go around looking. But let me know if you are one of the people that do the streaming, and of course, if AD Fall Guy there does stream, anybody who's watching, I would recommend you take a look at what he does, because any of those arts like that are absolutely amazing. I kind of feel if I was doing chainmail that my hands would get too tired trying to twist all those rings in and out of shape. One of the things I've got to watch here is that I keep this loop, which is holding the material taut, which makes it a lot easier to do. I keep it sufficiently off the desk that I don't bang the needle on the desk. 2 reasons for that. One, the practical one of making holes in the desk or blunting the needle, but the second one is it means that the loop is short and it looks, you've unintentionally put the dimensionality into it that you might not have wanted. Okay, I could go further down, but I'm going to come back to that area a bit later on. Dice bagging chainmail. Oh, okay. Maybe a daft question, but is chainmail sharp, or is it? I can imagine, obviously, with them being rings, that they are quite smooth. But I was thinking, if you don't quite line up the rings properly, then does it make a mess and scratch all your dice? Or die, I believe, is a plural, isn't it? Plural, but dice. Are you doing it with aluminium rings or steel rings? Because I would guess steel is both hard to work with and heavy. I've known nothing really about it, to be honest. I've seen somebody using probably anodized rings because there were different colours, but what is it about chainmail that you enjoy making with it so much? It's always interesting to know why people do certain art forms. A lot of my art form has started from being a radio amateur. Well, I've always been good at art a long time ago. I've been terrified of it when I was young. There was a particular image I remember at infant school that put me off art for a long time. Nothing particularly innocuous, actually. It was I was in an art class or activity session. I was required to do a tin of fruit, and for some reason I recall trying to do a cutaway of a tin of fruit and being completely terrified of doing it. I have no idea why or what that was about, but I was really put off art for a long time, even though I was good at it. But I am a licensed radio amateur, and one of the things that I used to be really fascinated by was something called slow scan TV. It's very similar to a fax machine, if you like, but done live rather than printing on paper. So it comes on a TV screen rather than on paper. And associated with that, weather satellites, receiving the images from the weather satellites that are in orbit around the Earth. And that's some of those satellites use the same technique as slow scan television, and what that is you know on the screen that you're watching now, you probably you may be watching it in HD 720p. That refers to 720 lines. The P meaning something different, but 720 lines, and they're sent. Those 720 lines are sent at least 25, 30, 60 times a second to your monitor. Well, for slow scan, it can take 2 to 3 seconds to send one line, and so you see the individual pixels appear on screen, and that fascinated me, and I've been fascinated by pixel-based art forms for a long time. So I'm not referring to 8-bit sprites or anything like that, but just the way in which images are created from little tiny dots of colour. And so some art forms, and coloured chainmail, I can imagine, for example, interesting me if you created a big square panel where you use the colours to create a picture. So I get fascinated. Well, I get lost in doing this, and I kind of remember to keep looking up at the things to make sure everything's properly closed. Yeah, anodized aluminium. Yeah, that gives you a range of colours, I guess, and you don't have a problem with rust. I know aluminium corrodes, but it's not quite the same thing, is it? Okay, yeah. That's yeah. I find quite a few people. It's just the material that they like working with. I love doing this, for example. And it's one of the things I love about it is you might hear it as I push the needle in, and I'll shut up in a second. But there's a crunch. No, that's a pussycat. But there's just a crunch as the needle goes through, and I find that fascinating. No, don't stand on there. You're now being visited by an artist model. He wants to sit on my knee. So hopefully he's going to settle down on my... No, don't sit on the... Excuse me. Well, I persuade this pussycat to do something, and I'll start doing some more on stream in a moment. Bubbles the Monkey, good afternoon. I watched you for quite a while yesterday finish off that piece. I tended to lurk because I was watching about 3 streams at once, and a lot of people were playing music, so I had the volume turned down. 14,000 rings, that sounds like a lot of work. you going to go somewhere, Mr. Pussycat? This Pussycat, although you can't see who it is called Junior. Come on, Junior. Settle on my knee then. He's been outside. It's pouring with rain outside, so you might imagine he's a little bit damp. Yeah, that's if I was interested in chainmail, that's probably what I would be sort of interested in doing, Eddie Fall Guy. I suspect a lot of people think of chainmail as armour more than anything, and sort of the reenactment people and things like that, but come on. Now this Pussycat used to be feral, so that meow there was because I pushed him slightly to try and get him to sit off the desk. But it was quite as likely if I'd have continued, he'd have decided to turn around and bite me. So just being a little bit wary of him. Now I've got to clean the desk because I don't want his dirty paw marks all over this piece of fabric, which I've already got. Luckily this is the back, so that's not so much a problem. You're starting did you get round to ironing them yesterday, Bubbles, or have you left that for another day? Yeah. Despite the fact I've got a transferred image on here, you still sometimes have to refer backwards and forwards to the reference image that I'm using. Actually, I'm using about 3, but they're off screen, just to decide which line is which, because of course I'm covering them up as I go along, so sometimes you just lose the idea of which one's where. Okay, this works better if you can actually support the material, so a big loop like this, which will be the ultimate frame for this, it tends to bounce, the material tends to bounce, it's not as well supported in the middle, so I'm just putting my fingers underneath in such a way that I don't jab myself with the needle because it hurts, but enough to just support the material. Okay, do you do the ironing on stream, Bubbles, or do you do that off stream? Because I think you mentioned you do that on your kitchen table. I'll try and catch your next stream. How long do you go on for, Eddie Fall Guy? I know you said 8 PM, but I'm not without scrolling back now in the 8 PM UK time. Okay, how long do you go on for? Because that tends to be about when I start, 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I go on for about 2 hours. So, because what you're going to say now is that you go on for about 2 hours and stop at about 10 o'clock. So I might not get a chance to see you. Do you record your streams, or are they only live? In other words, do I get the chance to watch the recorded video? Okay, that'll do to go that far back, so I'll just come further back here, one more row just to finish this particular section of this red off. Ow. I believe I mentioned the needle is relatively sharp and I should keep my fingers out of the way. I didn't. No blood, well, I hope there's no blood, I can't see any at the moment. It didn't feel strong enough to actually cause that. One thing with this is you kind of keep going. I want to just do another row, just just finish that bit. Just do another. You can spend hours, and all of a sudden, time has vanished. Bit like now, remembering to look up at the stream, at the chat. Okay, normally for about 3 hours, so I might actually catch some of your stream. Oh yeah, Bubbles. Luckily, I've only had a couple of people come on and say, hurry up, and it's kind of like, I'm using extremely sharp chisels here. You want me to hurry up? You can go away. Yeah. But I've kind of learned, about the impatience thing myself, and it is easy to get impatient. And if you're trying to do it on stream and the art form is particularly slow, then you're always, I guess, worried that people are going to find it boring, and it's, even though it really isn't, whatever it is you're doing really isn't boring. It's just people's attention span these days. I know I'd kind of like to see somebody do it, live, and because I've seen a few done on YouTube, and they're either little tiny ones or pieces that they've ironed, or they've done it in time lapse. And as you know, I've got a kit on order, so I'm kind of interested to see how I'm gonna get on with, because I want to do fairly large pieces like you were doing there, or at least something like this size, for example, which is about 4 panels, isn't it? Something like that. And I'm kind of interested in just how that's going to go when I start having to iron that. I was thinking then I'd left a space, and I've just realised that's because there's a yellow stripe goes down there. So I left that space on purpose. That's unusual. Oh, hey, that's clever. I just hovered my mouse over that in the chat window, and I've got a pop-up with the picture on it. Christmas wreath. Didn't even have to click it. That's clever. Yeah, that is good. I like that. Now that is cheating, isn't it, Bubbles? Missing out on all the stuff in between. Okay, now that's it. Okay, that's interesting. Hadn't realised I'd done that, but I have. What I just noticed there is the height of this, of the lighter red at the back and this darker red here, and the bright red, the different heights. I've created dimensionality accidentally, because I thought I was doing all these at the same height as each other, but there is these loops here, the bright red I've just done, are actually slightly longer by 1 notch of this needle than the ones behind it. So that wasn't quite what I intended to do, but that doesn't look too bad. It's sometimes, well, I say I do this sometimes to create the dimensionality. So in this particular case, the roof is curved, so this would be, it sort of curves away a little bit. Normally I'd have wouldn't have made it a pronounced edge like that. I'd have perhaps either taken a little bit of this lighter red just before the edge, done it at the same height as this, or made the lighter red sort of pinky colour there, the first row perhaps the same height as this lighter red, just so that it was more more smoothed. But well, it's okay. Yes, by all means, 84 guy, that's quite okay. Now you're okay, Bubbles. Yeah, you are correct. I normally do like people to ask first before they post a link, as AD has done there. But you asked the other night, and as long as you're posting pictures of the images that you're working on, I'm quite happy with that. You come in here enough to know for me to know that's what you're going to do. Okay, let's have a look at that. Oh, yes, this is your sign, isn't it? The name. That's good. I like that. What happens if you make a mistake and you look at that and you go, "Oops, I should have put something." Can you sort of correct a mistake in the middle of all that Edifol guy, or is it a case of once the ring's embedded, it's virtually impossible to fix it without undoing everything? No, I like that. Hey, that's good. Pixel-based art form, you see. It's the sort of thing that would interest me, but I don't have the room at the moment. It does interest me, but I don't have the room at the moment. How many colours do you have available in your colour palette for that? I'm assuming you don't anodize them yourself. Yeah, because every ring seems to go through about 6 others, and they all have to be laid in a particular direction, don't they, to for it to look okay. Right. Now then, I left right down at the bottom end here just because of this angle I was working at. Just made it a bit awkward. Yeah, and I probably want to do that in the lighter colour anyway, so I shall come back to that after a while. Okay, so 4 others. Yeah, quite a complex. Well, to somebody standing on the outside, it looks quite a complicated sort of process to try and get them all in the right place. I'm sure you find it quite easy, relatively speaking, these days. Okay, have I done with this colour now for at least for the moment? Yeah, I have. So, whilst I can literally do any part of this, I can dot around all over the place, and sometimes I do. I tend to try and work, let's say, from a corner or from top down, something like that. It just makes it easier. And if I'm doing a large piece where I'm doing it on a square frame, as I do for rugs, which is done in a larger tools but a similar thing, then I do work either from top to bottom or bottom to top, because the bigger pieces then get rolled onto a roller, which is part of the frame, and dotting backwards and forwards there would be really awkward because you'd have to keep rolling it and unrolling it and generally messing about. That colour there. Actually, there's a bit of grey to do on the roof, so I'm going to do the grey, and then I will do the yellow stripe, and then yeah. So I'm working on the roof for the moment. I'm also thinking about whether or not to insert this as an art form into my here I'm going to sound like I don't know, thinking about this. I'm going to say into the rotation of arts that I do, along with the carving and the pyrography and the scraper board. But kind of sounds like I've been doing it for years, but broadcasting, that is. But of course, it's only about 3 weeks now, so I've done one piece in each of the 3. So I've done one pyrography, I've done one carving, which has been painted, and I've done one scraper board, and I've just started another pyrography piece day before yesterday, I think it was. It kind of sounds a bit pretentious. Should I insert this into the sequence? I'm kind of remembering now that I'm doing it just quite how much fun it is for me, shall we say, to do this as an art form. Because half the work is preparing the transfer in the first place, but this is kind of the fun bit, filling in the colours and the shapes that I want, and generally making it look like what it was intended to look like. So I'm just concentrating on threading these needles because it gets frustrating. You get it through the gap easily enough, but then, well, being a fella, my hands are a little bit rough, so the thread sticks to my fingers and then pull it back out through the loop, and sometimes it just will not go where you want it to go. And all funny comments aside associated with that statement. Now then, 1, 2, 2, yeah. Yeah, Junior, that's the fella that sat on my knee, was probably the first one that I did, so you probably saw me do Junior Aspect, unless you dropped in yesterday. And then it was another of the cats my wife asked me, so my first commission, if you like, to to do Felix, which is this one I'm working on at the moment. I'll be doing later tonight. Okay, yeah, 10 by 10 squares. Well, you've got to challenge yourself, haven't you, AD? I mean, the first airbrush piece I did was my computer case, and it's got tropical fish and on it, and coral, and I think there's a whale on there, not to scale, mind, and a dolphin, and a couple of turtles. So that's how I like to do, is challenge myself. Don't start easy. What's the first pyrography piece? Was if you won't see the scraper board, but I did a pyrography piece which was a portrait of a person, which was the same person actually was the first monochrome airbrush I did as well, which is white on black. So I do pick some interesting ones to do. Yeah, I lurk a lot. There's sometimes, especially as I say, if people are playing music a lot, then I tend to lurk just because I turn the sound down. I can cope with and I can handle a few streams where people are talking. I can separate them out, and then I can I quite often will participate then in conversations, especially if the chat's a bit not particularly fast. The fast chats I tend not to bother with, but when there's a lot of music being played, then I tend to silence the stream if I'm watching multiple ones, just so that I can concentrate. Multiple voices isn't bad. Multiple music sources is create some very interesting sounds, shall we say. Now I'm guessing, but this looks like a grill on the top of the engine, so hence the grey. Oh, by the way, Bubbles, I didn't mention it on your stream, but your mic level was really low compared to the music. I could hardly hear you when you were speaking. I don't know if it was just how you had things, but couldn't really turn the volume up because the music was then somewhat louder, and it didn't really help. Airbrushing as well, yeah. Yeah, that was. Now he's going. He's decided he didn't like me leaning over him once too many times. That was one of the first things I watched on in the creative. There was a guy that I used to follow, JB Drawing, or Artillery62, I think his name is on here. And should I do that? No, that's it'll look better in grey. He normally was in the Minecraft game section, drawing Minecraft, and so I followed him because I enjoyed watching drawing as well, and he's quite good at it, even though he does stream silently, which is an unusual stream for me to watch. And I saw him in creative and thought, what's this creative thing? And came in, and one of the first things that I spotted was somebody, 3D bloke airbrushing, and that kind of hooked me because airbrushing is something that I like and enjoy. So, and I've never been. I don't think I've watched any other section since then. Now there's just a greyish black shadow outline of a panel just around here, so just doing this in the grey before I switch back to using the red. Oh, switch back to using the yellow I think first, and then we'll fill in the red. Okay, there's another panel back there. I can't really see what colour it is, so we'll do it in grey. I'm the artist, I get to choose. I'd probably get somebody who actually has a real life interesting locomotive telling me at some point, but it doesn't have a grey panel there. But I just like the look of the picture. I am kind of interested in model trains because I love modelling, and I actually love any miniature things. Little models, all sorts of miniatures. And the more wheels it's got, the better as well. For some reason, I like lots of wheels. But I'm not particularly a train aficionado, as they say. Note to self: remember to keep looking at chat. Do I only stream in creative? Yes. I mean, I don't stream games. I'm not a. Oh, I was about to say I'm not really a game player. I mean, I do play games, simulator games mainly, or adventure games if I do play them. So things like Farming Simulator and Euro Truck Simulator, Train Simulator. I enjoy the simulators basically, and I would play the Microsoft Flight Simulator as well, but I know to do that I'd love to get a proper joystick and pedals for it and things like I do for the truck. It makes, using an external device like that makes a big difference to how a game feels when you play it, and I don't particularly want to go out and buy those at the moment, so whilst I have Microsoft Flight Simulator, I am avoiding playing it. But apart from that, you see a lot. This, for example, I potentially could go and stream in the Train Simulator section, but there was only 15 people watching streams in there, so there's more people in creative. So if I wanted people to see what I'm doing, creative is the better place for that, and there was nobody playing Flight Simulator at all, and I like some of the images. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but I mean, for example, that's a pyrographic. That was a practice piece, and there's a great big mistake in it. But that's a practice piece. I mean, I could do that on stream. Well, I may do in the future. I mean, I could just put that onto this Punchcraft or Carve it even, or do it in all the art forms. I kind of like aircraft. I used to fly model aircraft. Got some helicopters, and I just like the images of them. And but there's nobody in Flight Simulator at the moment, so I couldn't really go into World of Warcraft, for example, and do that. Actually, no, I couldn't. I could maybe go into World of Warplanes, perhaps, but is that one? World of Warships, World of Tanks. I don't know if there's one of planes. Go on, you're going to tell me you stream Minecraft and Flight Simulator. Dear. I'm not very good at them. That doesn't bother me for streaming purposes, stream not being very good at them. I'm streaming not being very good at the art forms that I'm doing, but I'd kind of rather do this these days on stream. It's if I was after people watching me, and I don't mind if people do or don't, to be honest. But if I was after people watching me, I think I'd rather it was for this than playing a game. But if I was just trying to think that Farming Simulator is probably not too bad, but Euro Truck Simulator, if I was trying to read chat at the same time as driving, well, don't text and drive. Applies to the game version as well, even when you are using a steering wheel. I find, just going back to your music comment there, Eddie Fall Guy, I don't mind people, when my personal opinion, when I go and look at streams to watch, I don't mind people playing music in the background. When it's played such that it's really loud on stream, then I tend not to want to watch, either because I just don't enjoy whatever music is somebody's playing, or it's just so loud that I have to turn it down because I'm watching another stream at the same time. But if it's in the background, so that you're listening to it if you like, but you're not, this is the royal you, not you in particular, and you're not forcing the whole of the stream to listen to it, then I don't mind that. But you might notice I'm not streaming with music, I just talk. So I'm telling people what I'm doing. If I go to a stream which is silent, and by silent I mean the streamer isn't talking, even if it's something that fascinates me, I don't have the patience to stay very long. There's something about it which after a few minutes I've kind of had enough, and I'll move on to something else. Where somebody is talking, with the physical stuff, I enjoy learning how people do things, but more importantly why they do things. I think I've probably mentioned it before on stream, where I've seen a lot of YouTube videos, and let's say for carving, and what you'll get is somebody saying, well, to do this you use this particular chisel, as along the lines of, you must use this chisel, it's the only one you can possibly use. And it's kind of like, okay, well, why can't you use a different shaped one? And I don't get, you don't get that explanation. So when you get your own piece of wood and you've got a chisel out and you're going, well, I don't have the one that they've got, so what do I do? And you've got no reference to understand why a particular tool might be the right one to use as opposed to something else. So I kind of enjoy watching the streams where people are actually sort of explaining what they do. So if I came to watch yours, it'd be nice to hear you sort of saying what it is you're doing, and just a little bit about it. And I know you end up repeating yourself when you do that, because I do that all the time on the stream. But every 10-15 minutes I go through the same thing about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and where the materials come from and things like that. But and I kind of find those fascinating. And when I come across somebody doing that sort of thing, and I'll tend to stick around. But that's my own personal opinion, of course. How you want to work is up to you, and other people, I'm sure, have completely different opinions. ETS2 train sim, yeah. I was about to say, I kind of like the realistic sims. I know they're kind of not really that realistic, but they sort of half and half in that respect. You know, they are close to as close to realistic as being a game will let you do without getting really really boring and pedantic about absolutely everything, tying down a load or something like that. It's everything's perfectly set up and stuff, but it's still I still find them more realistic, and I'm kind of thinking things like construction simulator or bridge building simulator, which is too contrived for me as a simulator. Yeah, and I mean the bends on Euro Truck Simulator come every sort of few seconds, don't they? Really. They're not few and far between. Dear. I don't think you can really. I mean, I know I sometimes sort of say, if I'll say on stream, especially if I've got quite a few people watching me, if you've heard this all before, feel free to tell me in chat and what have you. But I actually have never heard anybody say, I've heard that 16 times already. Would you shut up for once? I think it. Well, I say it's my own personal opinion, but I think it just makes it more interesting when you understand. Because sometimes, I mean, things like, and I don't know this, but when you're, as you said earlier, it's quite important to make sure that you close the rings properly. So that I'm guessing, so that they don't catch on things and you don't rip you or damage whatever it is, and potentially so they don't unwind themselves as well, I guess. And people don't necessarily understand why you might be fiddling with something quite a bit, and just explaining that sort of thing makes it more, they feel more involved because they understand what's going on. And then when anybody new comes in the stream, they get to show off the knowledge. The problem I probably mentioned it earlier, the problem I get is I get engrossed in what I'm doing like this, and I'll forget to actually talk. I'll just go silent. And because I'm looking down, and if I forget to look up at chat as well, you get people going, "Has your mic failed?" And you look up to a whole row of things like that. Okay, by all means. And if there is anybody else out there watching, don't feel like Fall Guy there is, or me talking back to him, is dominating the chat. Feel free to drop in, say hello. Bubbles, if you're still around, you're welcome to in chat. I hope we haven't put you off by what we're talking about. Tell us something about what you enjoy looking for in a stream. What makes you... This is everybody, not just Bubbles Debunky there. And what makes you want to watch a stream or move on to the next one? It's always interesting as a streamer to hear why people choose to stay and watch. either from the professional one of changing what we might do to make it more acceptable to people, because we sometimes will do that as streamers, I guess, not everybody, and not all the time. But if it's something that seems reasonable, then you got your chance to improve the stream. Okay, whilst I'm going backwards and forwards here, I'm not being precise about the distances between things. It doesn't really matter a great deal. My distance is varying quite a bit in both both axes here. I just need to fill in the space really, so I can always go back over if I haven't quite put as many in or I've missed a little spot out. So it's quite a nice thing to do. From that perspective, it's an easy thing for me to do on stream because it doesn't require precision. All it requires of me is A, to follow a line so I don't go where I don't want to, and B, to keep my fingers out of the way of the sharp pointy object I'm pushing through the fabric. Okay. So I'll cut the threads off so I don't catch them and then end up pulling out a whole row of these. They're not exactly stitches but loops. Sometimes do use the word stitches, but we're not actually stitching, we're just pushing a loop of fabric through. So there we go. This bit down here, the yellow will look a little bit thinner once I put some more of the colour in. Above it, this red, it'll go into a finer line here. I can see around here it's a bit mixed is the colour. I might come back to that and have a look later and see if I need to push a little bit more yellow through just to make it a bit brighter, but for the moment it's okay as it is. So I'm now going to do some more of this lighter red down the back here, and I might just try and smooth the transition off a little bit, but so I'll move on to changing colour. So if you're not familiar, well, as you're probably not with this, it's it's not a particularly common art form or craft, I suppose. It's called Punchcraft, which is two words, not one. And the tools and the material, actually, and the thread as well, are all supplied by a manufacturer in the UK called Webster's. Webster's Punchcraft is kind of the name for it. They supply kits as well as individual threads and tools and material. So you've got the option of using kits, which come with a ready supplied material, all pre-printed with the pattern, and they give you the right number of bobbins of colour that you need, and the colours that you actually need. So everything's in the kit for you, so you don't need to go out and buy anything else afterwards. Some of the kits even come with a hoop which allows you to tension the piece like I'm doing here. Not all kits do. So if you do buy a kit or look at a kit that doesn't have a loop in it, it's well worth getting one. They're usually called embroidery hoops, which is what this is, but this will also be the final frame for this particular piece as well. So it's depending on, you can get cheap I was about to say cheap plastic, that's not strictly true, but you can get plastic hoops which you may or may not want to use as a frame, but they work just as well. These wooden ones though look quite nice when used as a frame, so what it allows me to do is basically just leave it now on this frame, and when I've finished it's done, and I don't have to bother worry about having to reframe it. I'm doing this round, doesn't have to be, can be any shape you like. I'm going to actually fill in the complete background of this, so it will be a complete circular piece when it's finished, but again you don't have to, you can leave the background clear as it is. You can put fabric glue on the back of this once it's done, and once you have done that, then you can even cut around the outside, and the piece then sort of freestands, so to speak, and can be glued to something else, for example. So what I'm doing here is just running one line all the way down here with the needle at setting position 3, so it will be the same height as the yellow loops on the other side, and then I'm going to drop it down to 2 to match the rest. That was kind of an inadvertent thing that I did. It was kind of accidental. I was going to do everything at the same height, but as I have said before, you can create dimensionality, so to some extent this roof curving away from you, there's no particular reason why, or rather it doesn't look too bad to have the this top height of the roof at a slightly lower level than the sides of the roof. It adds a little bit of dimensionality into it and can add interest to the piece when you're looking at it from the other side. We're working on the back here, so back to front, so to speak, which can be interesting if you want to do writing, like for example the numbers here and the EWS. You've got to remember that they are backwards on the back in mirror writing, so if you're taking a real life picture of some kind and trying to turn that into a piece, you have to remember to reverse the writing, otherwise it's backwards on the other side. If it was the right way here, it would be backwards on the other side. There's nothing particularly unusual about the thread I'm using. It's not a cotton. Well, I'm saying it's not a cotton. I don't actually know what it's made of, but it's quite a fluffy thread. Cotton tends to be quite silky and smooth, and that actually makes it slightly bulky, which works quite well in here. You can use cotton. Generally though, you'll do that using a different version of the same tool, which I believe has got sort of finer needles. Don't actually know. I've got one around here somewhere. It's coloured. It's coloured green is the tool to distinguish it. But generally, if you're using cotton, it works very well for smaller pieces. This particular thread doesn't work very well on little tiny pieces like a badge or something like that, whereas the cotton works a lot better. You can use cotton on bigger pieces as well. You just need to do more loops. The material that I'm punching this into though is somewhat special. I've tried doing it on different materials before, even some that look like this, but all I've ended up doing is just creating great big holes. The material didn't hold together, so this material, supplied by the manufacturer, there is something about it which allows it to stay together once all the this thread is pushed through it. So if you were to try this on, I don't know, a pair of jeans or something, you might not get the effect that you were after. That's, if you wanted one of these patterns on something like a pair of jeans, then that's probably where you'd cover this in fabric glue, let it dry, then cut it out and actually sew the patch onto the jeans or jacket or something like that. Manufacturer, as I say, does have kits available, so I mean, I'm taking this from just an image that I've got here. It's not a kit. I happen to have quite a few. Well, I've got the complete colour range of threads that they make available, and I've just taken an image that I've got here that I happen to like, and I've converted it into this transfer, which has then been transferred onto this material. It's a hot iron type transfer method, and then I'm just picking out the colours that I want to use. You can see the image develops fairly fast. I mean, it still takes several hours perhaps to do something like this, and will take several hours, but it does move on fairly quickly. And of course you can always do things like listen to music or anything while you're doing it. Whilst you need to sort of concentrate to the perspective of not jabbing yourself and to stay within the lines that you're wanting the colour to be in. But apart from that, it's fairly easy to. It's an easy craft to do. It's quite good, from a beginner's perspective as well, because of that, especially if you start with a kit, because it does develop quickly. As a beginner, you don't feel sort of frustrated by lack of progress. And there's nothing about it that you don't have to do things in a certain sequence. You don't have to do colours in a certain order or anything like that. There is orders that make things easier to do because you're covering up your pattern as you do this. So certain things are easy to do while you can still see your pattern. But other than that, you can pick your colour, pick your place, and just go for it. Oh, you were making dinner. Oh, okay. Actually, nearly time for my dinner as well. I think I've got sausages and chips for tea. Or dinner, depending on late afternoon, early evening meal. Whatever that may be called, in whichever part of the country you're in. Dinner means different things to different people. Of course, you can actually get quite fast at doing this. I'm not particularly doing it as fast as I could, and don't have any particular desire to speed this up to the ultimate that I can get away with, but you can do this quite quickly. Sometimes it can be fun to try and do it fast. Other times it's just as much fun to just slow it down. Or even do things like chat to people who are in the room, or in this particular case, you guys on stream. which of course is a reminder to myself to look up and see what's happening in chat, because I'm concentrating on what I'm doing here. Okay, so I've got a piece to do here and a piece to do here. It's kind of too long to just stretch the with the needle, but what I can do is just pull it out like this. I don't actually have to cut it off. I'll come back afterwards and cut it off. I don't leave loops behind because you can get caught in them and pull the threads out, but yeah, temporarily I don't have to pick up a pair of scissors. I can just drag a little bit of the thread out and then go back afterwards and cut it. Okay, now because I'm going to go right to the other end here of the roof, I am going to cut this rather than waste a fair bit of thread. I'm kind of a miser with materials like this or any other that I use in art. Don't like wasting too much of it. Don't mind a little bit like that, but 6 inches, that's a bit too much for me. I'm a Yorkshireman. Yorkshiremen do not like wasting things. Hola Cole, good afternoon, good evening. Pasta carbonara. Oh, that sounds nice. Don't mind a bit of pasta. Hola Cole, how are you doing this evening or this afternoon? It's afternoon in the UK time. We're just coming up to about 5:20. I'm just trying something. Well, I just felt like streaming this afternoon, and it's been a while since I've done this, which is Punchcraft, and whilst moving things around in the studio here the other day, I came across some of the threads that I happened to have out, and it generated the sort of the itch or the desire to do some of this. So I thought this afternoon, this evening when I stream, I'll be back to doing the pyrography, but I just thought I'd have a go at doing this. So if I turn that over, I mean, even the back doesn't look too bad, and that's what the front looks like. Again, it might look better when it's got more on it, but we shall see. I think I need to just fill this gap in here. It's a grill. I happen to know that the hole needs behind there because I can see it, but the brown looks like a dark red. I'll fill that in brown. Long walk and a kebab for lunch. Well, it's been raining quite heavily today in Yorkshire where I am, so I actually don't mind being out in the rain, but really heavy rain, it's kind of, yeah, no thank you. But I don't mind going out in the rain and walking, but kebab sounds nice. Now I mentioned the position of the needle. There's a click stop here, which determines how long the loops actually are. I've been doing it on position 2 and position 3. And I think I forgot to switch to position 2 when I did this one back here, so I've got a slight sort of error, shall we say, but yeah, it'll do. I don't mind it. But you thread the needle in a particular position here. The reason being is the threader is only so long. So by pushing the needle basically as far in as it will go, but still be poking out enough to actually get the threader in, it actually comes out the back here with just enough room to get the thread through. I'm guessing that the manufacturers did that so they didn't need to have a longer version of this, and this has to move anyway, so yeah, save a fraction of a penny. Now I'm just trying to move the thread out of the way of the hole, because I don't actually want to push the thread out through the thread. I want to do it the other way around. and I just put the thread through the threader, not otherwise you never get the thing out again. You end up cutting it off. I do it occasionally, it's very easy to do, so just a little bit frustrating when once you've pulled it through and you realise what you've done. It's just a matter of cutting the end off, but yeah. Now then, since this is all done with a height 2, I need to do the same thing, otherwise it will look odd. So height 2, and then we'll just turn it over and fill in that space. So what was the weather like where you were, Holocall, then? I'm guessing it'll probably have been nice weather, but maybe you two enjoy being out in pouring rain. Did you have the kebab while you were out? Because there's something different about eating food like that when you're outside as opposed to inside. So it tastes different. Like fish and chips, which is eaten a lot in the UK. Eat that outside, tastes completely different to eating it inside. Especially if it's in newspaper. And if anybody's wondering, at one time they actually used to use newspaper, now they use newsprint paper. It's the same paper, but it just doesn't have any ink on it these days. And of course they then buy it direct from the paper manufacturer or the warehouse or whatever, rather than using literally the old newspapers that the printers never sold, which is what they used to do many years ago. I suspect these days health and safety wouldn't let them do it, or trading standards, but yeah, that's true. Although the last time my wife and I had fish and chips on the seafront, the seagulls decided to get in on the act, and my wife's fish ended up in the sand with a lot of gulls all over it, and she was somewhat startled and surprised, and we had to go buy new fish. But yes, you're right, again, they do taste different on the seafront. They're different fryers. That's people who fry fish and chips. You can have two shops next to each other and they taste completely different because of the way in which they've cooked it. That can either depend on something as simple as the medium, so some people use oil, some people use fat, and that changes the taste. But people have their own slightly different mixes of batter and things like that for fish, and it can change the taste. We have quite a few fish and chip restaurants around us, which some are better than others, and although there's in Yorkshire there's quite a famous fish and chip place called Harry Ramsden's, which no longer own their original restaurant. They've sold it on, and it's now an international brand where they for a long time they kept the home of Harry Ramsden's, but I say that's been sold on now. But that was a world famous fish and chip place. People would literally come from all over in the country. If you were in Yorkshire and there was a mystery trip somewhere, it usually involved a trip to Harry Ramsden's at some point. But they were never very good. Those of us who have tried both sort of, yeah, they're all right, but prefer others. Now then, it's 5:30. It's 5:30, and I think what I'm going to do is I've done the roof there basically. Actually, there's one little bit I'll do. I was about to say enough, so I'm probably going to finish. But there is one little bit that I will... Actually, I've missed a bit. So I'm going to finish the roof and then I'm going to give up for this evening. I'll get my tea and then I will move over on to doing the pyrography. But I've missed a little bit down here and I want to just put there's a dark red loop which I want to put in as well. In fact, I'm going to do the dark red loop first whilst I can see where it should go. And then I will complete the roof and then that will be the end of this particular stream. Brighton, yeah. Oh well, you see, Brighton's the south coast, you know. Southerners don't know how to make fish and chips. He says it's a bit of a... That's a little bit of a sort of a county stereotype, or a north-south stereotype, is that Southerners don't understand how to make Yorkshire puddings, they don't understand how to make fish and chips. If you go into London, that's possibly true, they don't understand, but you like what you're used to, so you know, wherever you are, you've got used to the taste, and you go somewhere else and it's completely different. Yeah, oh, my wife literally was holding it right in front of her, and she just got bombarded by a whole flock of them. They just literally swooped in, claws grabbing for the fish, and they knocked the fish and the chips and everything. The whole, because it was in a plastic box as opposed to paper, but knocked the whole thing on the floor. It was immediately swarming all over it, and it's apparently quite common these days. Now then, just put that bit of red in there. Sort of shows up. I'm going to do another row around this one here. See if I can make it stand out a little bit more. As I say, you can always go over things again. Okay, down there I think. You see, now I can't see where the original line was, and so I'm just slightly guessing. I can see a little bit of the thread on this side, so it's one reason why I did it first before I did most of the colouring, because I knew I wouldn't be able to see it afterwards. It's turned out a little bit better now. Okay, so just this light. Yeah, I'm going to do. I was originally going to do this sort of pink colour down here because it's quite light, but I think it'll probably look better if I stick with this light red. The main body is going to go a slightly darker version, but this is pointed at the sky, so I'm taking a little bit of a liberty with the colours involved. Just help to push the thread into the needle, because that way you don't jab yourself. Not do that without these threaders. Make sure you have at least one spare if you buy any of this stuff. Generally there's two come in a kit. They're very easy to lose, but it's impossible really to do this without them. well, it can be frustrating to use them sometimes when the thread just won't go where you want it to go. So if you're prone to rage quitting, take your time. Oh, that's right, there we go. Right, 1, 2, 3 positions, because these loops are done on position 3. And now just complete this last section down here, and then the roof will be done. Something the size of this loop would probably take, and this is the size of this loop if you like to fill it in completely, would probably take about a couple of days to do if you're doing it all day, which is relatively speaking quite fast for doing something of this size. Certainly if you were doing it using other stitching techniques like embroidery, for example, it would take considerably longer. So as I say, it's quite a fast art form, and therefore can easily make something like a weekend project, or if you're doing it during the week on an evening, I suspect you'd be easily able to complete something of this size in the week. Some of the kits are larger, some of the kits are smaller, and of course I'm doing this sort of freehand, so it's my own image, but it doesn't take a lot of practice to do once you get the hang of it. Okay. Yeah, that'll do. The pre-printed, the kits of that you buy that come pre-printed, they're printed a little bit like this black, and this is a mix of black and blue just because of the way the transfer worked, but they're generally printed black like this, and you'll have the usual thing like with painting by numbers. You'll get the number inside, which is the colour of the thread that you should use, so they're quite friendly in that respect, and they're printed a lot better than this transfer's worked out, but I've got enough detail there for me to work with this. Although as you move your hand over it, you do tend to rub it out when you've transferred it yourself. The pre-printed ones are a lot better in that respect, so I am going to have to be careful to make sure I don't lose some of this detail, and I probably will go over with a pencil a little bit later off stream and just fill in some of the detail before I lose it. But it's now 20 to 6, and I'm going to go get myself my evening meal. That's what it looks like so far. We've completed the roof. Now move on to the main body, and then I'm going to tend to work from the top down in this respect to get most of the locomotive in, down to the wheels, the rails, and then I'll just sort of put a blue sky in perhaps, or a grey-green sky, something like that, something that potentially looks quite nice, and then some gravel or something looking like grey and black speckles down here to fill in the ground. But not quite sure when we'll be doing this next. What I may do is I'm currently doing a pyrography piece, which is what will be on stream tonight, this one. I may well wait until this is completed, and then I might just finish this on stream after that, or I may well just leave this until next weekend and do it on stream at the weekend out of rotation. But not sure, we shall see. Depends on just what I feel like, and if anybody who comes on stream has any particular preference, feel free to mention it, and you never know, you might get to see whatever you want to see. But for the meantime, if anybody is watching and they feel like being notified when I come back on stream, which is going to probably be in at least around about 2 hours from now, in whatever time zone you're in. You can of course always click the follow button, the usual advert, click the follow button if you want to be notified when I go live again. Generally about 7 nights a week so far. Can't have more than 7 nights a week, but you know what I mean. That's about what it is. Sometimes it might be 6 or depending on other commitments, but at the moment 7 nights a week. 8 p.m. Thereabouts, British summer time, that's UK time at the moment, for about 2 hours, just depending on how things are going. It's generally not shorter, but sometimes it's longer than that. If you don't trust Twitch to let you know when I go live, you can also follow me on Twitter at Zaragonaut. The only thing I tweet is when I go live, so I'm not a prolific tweeter. You're not going to get inundated with thousands of tweets from me, so feel free to follow me on Twitter as well, and then hopefully you will get to be notified if Twitch is twitching, as it sometimes does. But apart from that, thank you all for watching. Hope to see you on this evening's stream and on future streams, and see you later.